Time travel is a fascinating mystery that has intrigued human beings for a very long time. But is time travel possible? Short answer, yes, and you're doing it right now, hurtling into the future at the impressive rate of 1 second per second. You're pretty much always moving through time at the same speed, whether you're watching the water trickle down a leaf or wishing you had more hours to visit with a friend from out of town. But this isn't the kind of time travel that's captivated countless science fiction writers or spurred a genre so extensive that Wikipedia lists over 400 titles in the category Movies about time travel. In franchises like Doctor Who, Star Trek, and Back to the Future, to go into the past or the future, characters board some kind of crazy transportation. After going back in time, the characters debate what would happen if you altered the present or past with knowledge from the future, which is where time travel stories intersect with the idea of parallel universes or alternate timelines. While some people believe time travel is just a myth that can be found in fiction and is not practically possible, quite a few individuals claim that they have successfully jumped through time and have experienced the phenomenon one-on-one. So what is the reality of time travel? Join us today as we look at some people who claim to belong to a completely different era in time and have traveled through time. Sergei Ponomarenko. On April 23, 2006, a man aged about 30 years known as Sergei Ponomarenko appeared on one of the busiest streets of the capital Kyiv, Ukraine. The man looked quite different from the people of that time, and everything about him was very striking and mysterious. Sergei was dressed in an attire that didn't match the current time, and it seemed he was dressed sometime in the Middle Ages, yet he was wandering on the busy metropolis streets as if he was one of the locals. Not only did his appearance set him apart, but people also started noticing his disorientated behavior and the confusion that flushed his face. Sergei was closely holding a vintage camera that seemed to belong to a bygone time but was fully functional, and he was clinging to it as if it was one of the most important things he owned. Not only the people walking by noticed his strange behavior, but so did the local police. Sergei went to the police officer standing nearby to ask for directions about an address that had not existed in the country for quite a few years. At first, the police thought he was playing some kind of prank on them, but later they realized it was something else, something more serious. After checking the identity of the young man, the police began to feel something really strange happening. The reason was that the person they were inspecting was quite young but was actually born in 1938, and he should have been around 70 years old. Also, the card Sergei showed looked like the national ID card of the disbanded Soviet Union, of which Ukraine was one of the fractions. The police took it as a case of lost identity and thought there was something mentally wrong with the man, because of which he was impersonating an older person. After arresting Sergei, they called a professor named Pablo Kutrikov, a psychiatrist, to interview him. After the team of mental health professionals examined and evaluated Sergei, they not only got to know he was not playing a prank, but also that he had a completely different story to sell. He told everyone that he was born in the city of Kyiv on June 16, 1932, and he was 25 years old and belonged to 1958. When the psychiatrist asked about the details of how he appeared in their time, he said it was daytime and he wanted to go for a walk in the city. He took his camera, but when he left his house, he saw a strange object that had a bell shape, and it was very strange and was flying in a strange way. He was trying to comprehend the mysterious structure, but the next thing he knew was that he was standing in a place that seemed familiar but was a lot different from his hometown, and something just didn't feel right. Before arriving in Kyiv in 2006, he confessed that he was with his fiancée, Valentina Kurish. After he took a picture with his fiancée, he saw something strange flying in the sky. Spontaneously, he took a picture of the flying saucer, and shortly after, he lost consciousness and blacked out. Without realizing it, the time suddenly sped off for decades until April 2006. There were not many options. The doctors and the police had to confirm or deny his story, and they were taking whatever he told them as delusions that he was facing. So Dr. Kutrikov decided to reveal the photos, which Sergei said had the proof to show he was telling the truth. But there was a difficulty. The techniques of development for old cameras like that of Sergei were different from those used in the 21st century. So they had to look for an expert in photography, Vadim Poizner, who was surprised when he realized that the type of roll was not being manufactured since the 70s. It was also impossible to explain how that roll could be preserved in such good condition for more than half a century. but Poizner managed to reveal all the images. Some were of the city of Kiev of the decade of the 1950s, and there was also a photo of a woman about 25 years old, and another image where Sergei Ponomarenko wore the same outfit as during the interview with Dr. Kutrikov. But the photograph that caught the most attention was where the UFO appeared in the form of a bell, as described by Sergei before developing the photographs. After seeing the pictures, Dr. Kutrikov interviewed Sergei again and was very interested in the picture showing the strange object in the air. Sergei said that he did not understand what the object was and how something like that happened to him at the same moment when he took the picture, and he went down to look at the camera and somehow he showed up in 2006. But this is not the most intriguing or confusing thing that happened. After talking to Dr. Kutrikov, Sergei went to his room in the clinic. The clinic's security camera captured the moment when he entered the room, but he was never seen leaving, and still somehow Ponomarenko disappeared. The only way out was always watched. The windows in the room had bars. It was impossible to escape. So now they investigated the case in more detail. The police confirmed that indeed during the era of the Soviet Union, this man existed, that he was declared missing in 1960. The police then traced Ponomarenko's trail by looking for his fiancée, and they found her. The girl in the photo was still alive as of 2006. She was 74 years old. When the police asked about Ponomarenko, Kurish recognized him. She also turned out to have the same photo the police had. Apparently, Ponomarenko had met his fiancée first because Kurish had another photo that Ponomarenko gave in 1970. Not only that, Kurish even had a photo of Ponomarenko who was in the future, namely in 2050. When compared, the two photos were both taken in Kiev in 2006 and in 2050. There is a visible difference. In the photo taken in 2050, you can see many skyscrapers. Sergei Ponomarenko disappeared in 1960 and was never found after that. Alfred Bielek. In 1984, the Philadelphia Experiment, which was an American science fiction film, was released in the cinemas. The action-packed movie took the viewers to the turmoil of the Second World War, where a top-secret experiment was underway to make US Navy ships invisible to enemy radar. But something goes horribly wrong, and the battleship Eldridge disappears. The ship is found after some time, but the condition of the crew members is horrifying. All of the crew members were scared and traumatized, and they claimed they had a supernatural experience. Some of the members were physically hurt, and most of them were declared mentally unstable. While it was claimed that the purpose of the Philadelphia experiment was to put Einstein's unified field theory to practical use by making a naval ship invisible, according to an alleged survivor of the movie's scientific outing, the Navy's purpose was entirely different, and the true purpose of the Philadelphia experiment wasn't invisibility, it was time travel. Alfred Bielek, who was born in 1927, was known as a walking encyclopedia while growing up, and he was very different from other people around him. When Alfred saw the movie The Philadelphia Experiment, he was very interested in the topic, and at one point he was so involved that he started having flashbacks from events he had never experienced during his life. In the start, they were brief flashes of memories, but then they started to intensify, and Alfred felt he was going mad, so he sought help from a doctor. The memories haunting him for a long time were a mystery to him for quite a while, but then he started to piece them together. According to him, he was feeling and seeing what Edward Cameron, who was a crew member from the Philadelphia Experiment, felt and experienced during the supernatural incident of the disappearance of the naval ship. When the equipment on the ship was activated during the experiment, the crew started to become scared and they panicked. To escape the chaos, Edward and his brother, who were subject to the odd happenings aboard the ship, jumped to safety only to land in the year 2137 in a hospital. While in 2137, he was treated for radiation injuries through a highly advanced series of treatments that relied on vibration and light. After some time, he was sent forward to 2749, where he lived for 2 years before jumping back in time again. Allegedly, Edward Cameron was sent on numerous time-traveling missions by the government, and later his soul was reincarnated in the body of Alfred Bielek. According to some theories, Alfred Bielek was actually Edward Cameron, and the government somehow jogged his memory to keep all the time travel missions a secret until he started to get the lost parts of his mind back. This is a wild story, but Alfred Bielek claims that he's experienced things that are hard to believe. Paul Dinac. In 1921, Paul Amadeus Dienach, a Swiss-Austrian professor with health problems, fell into a coma for a year. During this time, it is said his conscience traveled to the future and entered the body of another man living in 3906. When Dienach woke up from his coma in 1922, he had incredible knowledge and information about physics, which he previously didn't possess. Dienach maintained that he awoke in the body of Andreas Northam in the future, which supposedly was a well-known occurrence referred to as a conscious slide. Once in the body of Northam, Dienach received information foretelling events from thousands of years in the future. Before his death, Dienach turned over his notes filled with the information gleaned during the time as Northam to a student, George Papahatsis, who translated them into Greek from Dienach's native German. Some predictions made by Paul for the future include overpopulation, ecological destruction of the environment, economic inequalities, the wrong monetary system, the lack of adequate food for all people, and minor local wars along with a large colonization of Mars, followed by great natural destruction killing more than 20 million people. The collection of Dienach's notes was released as a novel under the name Chronicles of the Future in the 1970s. Dienach's alleged experience remains complicated and difficult to track, not to mention impossible to prove. While many say that whatever things Paul described were his dream or he was making up stories, some people believe the elaborate story he told and the predictions he made. The Man from Tauret. It was July 1954 when a smartly dressed man arrived at Haneda Airport in Tokyo, Japan. Much like other passengers, he made his way to customs, but whatever happened from this point onwards left all puzzled and concerned. When questioned by the customs officers, the mysterious passenger said he was from Tauret and claimed that it was the third time he was visiting Japan from his country. But to the surprise of the officers, they couldn't find any country named Tauret. Officers were perplexed because they had never heard about any such country. The passport of the man was issued by, of course, the Tauret, and the passport looked authentic, but the place was not recognized. So the man was then given a map and asked to point out his country. He immediately pointed to the area occupied by the Principality of Andorra. Andorra is at the border of France and Spain. The man said that his country has been in existence for 1,000 years and was a little puzzled why his country was called Andorra on the map. The man argued with the customs officers for a long time and refused to give in. He was also carrying currencies of different countries, probably because he had made several business trips. The mystery man shared other details like the company he was working in and the hotel where he stayed. Officials found out that the company he mentioned existed in Tokyo but not in Tauret. Similarly, the hotel he mentioned did exist, but hotel employees informed them that no such booking had been made. This prompted officers to take the man into custody for further interrogation. Officers were suspicious that he might be a criminal and confiscated his documents and personal belongings. The officers put the mystery man in a nearby hotel whilst they conducted their investigation. 2 guards were placed on the door to ensure that the mystery man didn't escape. It must be mentioned that the hotel room in which he was staying only had one entry and exit point, but to everyone's surprise, the man had vanished the next morning. Not only that, but all his personal documents had also disappeared. A search was launched to find the man, but in vain. The thing that was troubling investigating officers was that he was put in a room high up in the multi-story hotel building with no balcony. Some people argued that the mystery man was indeed from Tauret, but the country happened to be in another universe, and somehow he had passed through a parallel dimension and ended up at Haneda Airport. Another theory is that the mystery man was a time traveler and had mistakenly landed at the airport. And above all this, there are people who claim that it's just an elaborate internet hoax.